Hi everyone, my name is Anea and today we are going to go over my week 12 pregnancy update. So last week the baby was approximately the size of a lime, which is 2.15 inches in length. Their vital organs are now fully developed and will continue to grow throughout the pregnancy. Their digestive system is beginning to practice contractions in order to push food through the digestive tract. Ooh, a mouthful. Their intestines are beginning to move from the umbilical cord to their abdomen. Their bone marrow has begun to create white blood cells, and their kidneys can now secrete urine. The baby has developed more complex reflexes like sucking, curling their toes, and their fingers can form a fist. And then lastly, for development, their eyes and ears have officially moved to their permanent placement. So all of that is really exciting. The next thing we're going to talk about is the appointments that I had last week. This is probably going to be a lot. I'll let you know now that myself and the baby are okay. It's going to be a bit of a roller coaster of things that we're going to hear. So, to start, I went up to the maternal fetal medicine ward at the hospital to get my ultrasound. And they are going to continue to be the ones giving me my ultrasound, partly because of the high risk pregnancy in general, but also where my mom was born with some difficulties, some defects, if you will. They want to keep a really close eye during the pregnancy to make sure that if anything is developing, if anything is developing weird or wrong within the baby, that they catch it before the birth. So there's that. I have some pictures. Baby was very active and moving when we first started the ultrasound. They were like upwards and like curved in my stomach, so they were in a very weird, uncomfortable looking position. They did eventually move into a better position, so we were able to get some nice pictures. We got to watch them move around and lots of big stretches. It was very exciting. Their heart rate was at a good spot. I think it was at around 169, definitely in the 160 beats per minute range. And then the appointment quickly moved on to me. The first thing was that Dr. Ramji said that I was getting an official diagnosis for antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, which essentially means that I have tested positive with antiphospholipid antibodies. And they can cause blood clots and things like that, and that can cause miscarriages. So started off with a diagnosis. So far, to combat these antibodies, I've been taking 2 daily aspirins every night. And that was recommended by one of the doctors from the maternal fetal medicine ward. They had called my nurse practitioner and told her that they wanted me to go from 1 to 2. But while I was at this appointment, the doctor I was seeing said that they would highly recommend that I go down to one daily aspirin, and then she was also going to give me a prescription for a secondary blood thinner, but this blood thinner was going to have to be administered by needle daily. So myself and or Tristan was going to have to learn how to do needles, and I was going to have those. Um, because of this medication, um, they said that I was going to have to be induced at 39 weeks, because I can't have that medication in my system during the birth, in case I want like an epidural, or if something happens and I need to have a C-section. If I had that medication in my system, they wouldn't be able to give me, I think it was a spinal tap. They said I would have to go completely under, which isn't necessarily safe during labor. So obviously I was upset about having to have daily needles in general, because I have a phobia of needles, but I was honestly mostly upset about having to be induced, because I really don't want to be induced. Um, Being induced kind of by default makes the whole birthing experience like a medical procedure. I would have had to be like hooked up to IVs. They'd have like continuous fetal monitoring. It would likely hinder my ability to birth in more natural positions. Um, just overall, very much not the birth that I would ideally like to have. I'm a little out of breath. I've noticed that talking a lot, I'm a lot more out of breath lately. However, the doctor did say that she thought it was interesting that her colleague had previously been in contact with my nurse practitioner and had only recommended aspirin and not this blood thinner. So she gave me the prescription for it, but told me not to bring it into the pharmacy until she was able to talk to her colleague and see if there was a specific reason why this doctor didn't prescribe me the needle blood thinner earlier. Just to, because she knew I wasn't looking forward to it, so she wanted to give me the opportunity to not have to take it if I didn't have to take it. So that was kind of the end of that appointment. The only other thing that happened during that appointment was they noticed that my subchorionic hematoma wasn't really all that visible, so it looked like it had been healing on its own very well. So that was good. So after the appointment, I started driving home, made it into line at Tim Hortons, and the doctor from that appointment was already calling me. So she told me that while I do have the antiphospholipid antibodies, that the count of them was under 40. And because it was under 40, that there is no medical proof that this blood thinner needle medication would provide me any benefits. So she said that I had the choice of whether or not I wanted to continue to take my 2 aspirin, or if I wanted to still do the needle to be on the safe side, I guess. Um, I decided that I wasn't going to do the needle. Obviously, if there was documented evidence that it would increase my likelihood of having a full term healthy birth and pregnancy, then I would have done it. But she explained that if I was seeing a like a blood specialist, they wouldn't diagnose, they wouldn't prescribe me this medication because of my low um, antibody count. So I am not taking that medication. She did, however, say that because I do have these antiphospholipid antibodies, that there is a chance that I could develop preeclampsia. Um, and if that happens or something similar to that happens, that they would probably need to prescribe me that medication. They also said that it's possible that postpartum I could be prescribed that medication because after you give birth, you're naturally you're going to be bleeding a lot, which increases your chances of blood clots. Um, so there is a chance in the future I might need it, but as of right now, I do not, and I am happy about that. So then, the following day, I had a phone appointment with the OBGYN, and it was another appointment of contradictions. So, as I said at my ultrasound appointment, I was diagnosed with antiphospholipid antibody syndrome. And the gynecologist did not like that. So she definitely seemed irritated, not at me, but at the medical professionals that had been treating me thus far. And she essentially said that not enough tests have happened to have this official diagnosis. I do have part of what is needed to get this diagnosis, which is 2 positive antiphospholipid antibody tests. So I have gotten those. However, there needs to be a second aspect to get this proper diagnosis. So the first thing that, so the first option to get this diagnosis would be if they had ever found blood clots in my system. If I had those 2 positives and known blood clots, then I would get that diagnosis. But they have not found any blood clots in my system ever. So that's out of the question. And then the second part is to have recurrent miscarriages that have been shown to not have been caused by anything else. And to figure that out, one would need to have chromosomal testing for Tristan and I. And before I got pregnant again, they would have needed to check the state of my uterus to see if my uterus was healthy or if anything was wrong. The fact that no one has mentioned chromosomal tests for Tristan and I, especially the doctor that I saw the day previous, she was very annoyed about that. And she was also quite annoyed that no one had thought to check the state of my uterus. She said because that now I am pregnant that they can't do that. I think they could still do the chromosomal testing, which we will probably get done, but I need to, they haven't officially offered it to me yet. It was just kind of talked about at my last appointment. So I don't have that diagnosis. I have positive tests for antiphospholipid antibodies, but I do not meet the requirements yet to have an official diagnosis of that syndrome. So there was that. And then they said that they were going to take over my prenatal care. So I have a prenatal this afternoon with my nurse practitioner. But that's going to be my last prenatal with her. And then my next prenatal and the ones following will be done by the OBGYN. The only other thing left to talk about when it comes to this appointment is additional testing. So at my ultrasound, I had been given a blood requisition for some more antibody tests. And at my last prenatal, I was given a requisition to check my thyroid. And so I was planning on doing those tests at the same time last week. But when I had this phone call with the OBGYN, they wanted to add another requisition, one for I think another specific antibody that wasn't on my previous requisition, as well as an early gestational diabetes test because I am at high risk for various reasons. And she said that instead of doing the other tests that I was going to do last week, instead of doing those, to hold off and to wait until it's time to do the early gestational diabetes test, and that they do it all together. She said, no one likes to be poked a whole bunch, but especially if you don't like needles, I don't see any reason why you need to do those other tests before you do this one. So I was specifically requested to get my thyroid checked the first week of May, which would have been last week, by the nurse practitioner that I'm seeing today. So I'm feeling a little intimidated to go in and be like, yeah, I didn't do that. The gynecologist told me I didn't have to. So I am feeling a little intimidated about that, but I'm sure it'll be fine. But that is all of the appointments. Like I said, it was a big doozy of a roller coaster. Essentially, I was diagnosed, undiagnosed, prescribed a scary medication, and then prescribed said medication. Yeah. And then as for my symptoms, a lot of it is the same, although there is a few new things. So as for the same, still have crazy acne. I'm wearing makeup, so hopefully it's not as noticeable. I've still been quite tired. Still been having nausea. It's not as bad, and it's mostly just in the evenings, which has been nice. My boobs have still been tender. Yeah, those are kind of like the same symptoms that I have been having. As for new symptoms, round ligament pain. That's what I'm pretty sure it is. I'll probably talk to my nurse practitioner about it at my appointment today. But essentially, I'm going to stand up so I can kind of show you. I've been getting this pain like right in here, but then also like right at the top of my groin. It happens if I'm like laying down and changing positions in bed, or if I'm going from like any stationary to movement, I kind of get like a real sharp feeling. It also sometimes happens if like I sneeze or I cough. From what I've been able to tell from my research, it's around ligament pain. But it has not been fun. And with that pain, I've also noticed that if I'm up and moving around a lot, like say I'm out running errands or shopping, I get a lot of like hip and like lower back pain. along with an even more inflamed round ligament pain. So that's been fun. And then other than that, I've noticed that I've been a lot more emotionally sensitive and a lot easier to tear up. I'm not someone who cries a whole lot. And I still haven't, I've only cried like once or twice, but I'll notice that I'm tearing up more and that like I'm holding tears in a lot more than I am used to. But yeah, I think that's it. I'm gonna show you my bump and talk to you about that a bit, and then we'll wrap this up. So this is my bump. It looks about the same as usual, although I feel like I've been less bloated, which is nice. I've also noticed that I can feel my uterus. You can't really see it, so like I don't think it's adding to my bump or anything. But if I like stretch back just a teeny bit, it feels quite firm, like here. Which it didn't before. So hopefully that means I will be starting to show soon. That is it for today's video. It is definitely a doozy of a video, but I hope you stayed through it and enjoyed hearing about my update. I'm excited to talk to you next week as I am officially in the second trimester, which I've never made it to before. So I'm just very, very excited. But yeah, that's everything. I guess I'll see you next time. Bye.